I believe Sabomi is going to do our welcome.
Okay.
Good evening, everyone. We are so delighted you could join us tonight to talk about the Black agenda for the 95th Assembly District. My name is Sabomi McCauley, and I am the countywide president of the Westchester Black Women's Political Caucus, and I can see members of our Peekskill chapter as participants. So it's an absolute delight for me to introduce the president of the NAACP in Peekskill. Would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure, everyone. Hello, good evening, everyone. We will not keep you long. You know, I like to be very prompt. And so I want to say welcome to everyone. As everyone knows, we like to start off with our mission statement just to let you know what we believe in. And so the mission of the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People is to ensure the political, educational, social, and economic equality of rights of all persons and to eliminate race-based discrimination and ensure the health and well-being of all persons. Welcome everyone to this candidate forum. We won't keep you long. As I said, thank you very much. Sabomi McCauley, thank you so much for the introduction. And I am going to pass the introduction on to our dear neighbor in Ossining, Aaron Moore, who is the president of the Peekskill, president of the NAACP branch there. It's hard to not say Peekskill NAACP, but welcome. And Aaron, if you'd like to introduce yourself.
You're on mute.
Hi, my name is Aaron Moore. I am the president of the Ossining branch NAACP, and I'm happy that we're doing this forum again tonight as well. So I'm a guy with very few words. Thank you.
Okay, and I would like to introduce the brains behind tonight's candidates forum, and we are going to specifically talk about the Black agenda for the 95th Assembly District. So please join me in welcoming Martin McDonald, who is the founder of tonight's program. Martin, would you like to say a few words?
Yes, real quick. I just want to thank everybody for being here. It's just an idea whose time has come. It's something that we've talked about a lot. You know, here many of us in the Black community often feel like our voices are not being heard, or they're only heard for the election, and after the election is over, people leave us and they abandon us, they forget about it. So with the idea behind tonight is that we want to tell you what we need and see if you can deliver what we need, if you can respond to what a Black agenda is, not anybody else, but specifically a Black agenda. We're in a time now where, you know, it's okay to talk about Black and being Black and racism and all those things first in the conversation, rather than them being added at the end of the conversation. Oh, by the way, no, we want it to be first in the conversation, because we've seen over the years, and specifically with the election of Joe Biden, the power of the Black vote. If it were not for the Black vote, let's be honest, Joe Biden would not be there. And the work that Black people put in to put them into office. So now we're coming back and saying, okay, you want our vote, now you have to give us something. And that's the start of a conversation. And I hope it becomes a norm where anytime a candidate comes to a Black community or a forum like this, they answer questions that are specific to the Black agenda, and not necessarily a question, well, what are you going to do for us? But we present it in the sense of, here's what we want you to do. Can you get it done? If so, you'll get our vote. That's what this is, a beginning of a conversation. So I thank you all for being here. I thank all the people that have pre-registered in advance. I thank our candidates. You guys are amazing. Each one of you I know personally. And that's another reason why this came about. So, well, let me ask each of you to speak to some people that I know. So I'll leave it there. And as we're in good hands, I thank the Black Women's Political Caucus, Westchester Black Women's Political Caucus. Thank you for partnering. The Peekskill NAACP, always just doing some amazing things in your leadership, Valerie. And Aaron, for your steadfastness in the work that you're doing down there in Austin with the Austin NAACP. So thank you all. And that's all I have to say. So take it away.
Thank you so much, Martin, for that statement on the Black agenda. He's absolutely correct. The Black vote is what has got every politician nominated in these United States. So now we are asking, if you want our vote, what are you going to do for us? That's what this is all about. So I'm going to have Valerie introduce the moderators.
Mute.
Okay, there I am. Okay, so I am going to hopefully be able to find people because unfortunately, my pin went away. But nevertheless, I am going to introduce to you the candidates that we will be asking questions of tonight. And so that is Vanessa Agudelo, that is Colin Smith, and that is Dana Levenberg. Hello, everyone. Welcome to this forum. We will ask you all to have a statement, opening statement of 2 minutes, and then we will go in order of moderator to ask you the relevant questions that we have for you tonight. So beginning in alphabetical order, we will ask Vanessa Agudelo, and we will have Martin. Martin will wear a couple of hats. He will actually be the timekeeper tonight. So we're going to hold him to his timekeeping skills. And we're going to have him time you guys at 2 minutes apiece. We will let you finish your last sentence, but please keep it to 2 minutes. Okay. So Vanessa, you have the fortune of having a last name with the letter A. So we're going to start with you.
Yes, thank you. I'm a little used to it now after 30 years. But very excited to be here. It's a pleasure. My name is Vanessa Agudelo. I'm a lifelong Peekskill resident, longtime community organizer. And aside from having been the youngest ever as Peekskill City Council member elected at the age of 25 and serving there for the last 4 years, I've also worked professionally as an immigrant rights advocate for the New York Immigration Coalition, where I've helped draft statewide policy and organize statewide campaigns to pass transformative legislation such as the Green Light Driver's License legislation, the New York Heroes Act, the Protect Our Courts Act, and I led our efforts to establish our first ever fund for excluded workers, $2.1 billion in economic relief that was established on the state level for workers who did not have access to unemployment status despite losing their jobs during the pandemic because of their immigration status or because being part of the gig or cash economy. Many of you know me as an active member of the Peekskill NAACP, where I helped establish our first ever environmental climate justice committee and also helped organize a number of events to help advocate for policies that we were centering, including a town hall where we helped educate our community members as well as our state legislators on the benefits in restoring criminal justice and racial justice by passing marijuana legalization and ensuring that it was passed in a way that truly was undoing the wrongs caused by the war on drugs. And it's really this work that I believe in, the work of organizing and educating our community and getting them engaged in the democratic process so we can build political power and finally elect leaders who can take these systemic issues seriously. And as an organizer, I believe in the power of organized people. And in the face of a political system that is failing us, I believe that's the only hope that we have left. And that's why I'm running for office. I believe that we can build a New York where we guarantee healthcare and housing as a human right, and where we center our investments on social infrastructure to meet the urgent needs of the people, and where we take system-wide problems as institutional racism and climate change seriously. Thank you.
Thank you, Vanessa. Okay, alphabetical order. We have next our legislator, Colin Smith. Colin, would you give us your
that's not alphabetical order. Dana Levenberg. Levenberg, Dana. Last names, Levenberg.
Oh, I'm looking at C. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. Dana Levenberg, you're right. I'm like, wait, C. Okay. So next, Dana Levenberg, if you would give us your opening statement, again, Martin will be the timekeeper.
Thank you so much for the opportunity to speak here tonight and address these issues of major concern. Thanks in particular to Martin McDonald and the Black Diamonds for initiating this forum, and to the Peekskill and OSSI.
No. I'm sorry, not Black Diamonds, please. Oh God, no.
They didn't have anything to do with it? Okay.
No.
Okay. Well, okay. That's where it started, Martin. That's at least what you shared with me originally. So I know that they're not involved now, but I thought maybe they had something to do with it. Okay. So in any case, for thanks to the Peaceful Announcing NAACPs and the Westchester Black Women's Political Caucus for co-sponsoring, and all of your groups serve a critical function in our democracy and our society. The issues that we must tackle in Albany today directly impact the health and economic stability of every New Yorker, but we also know that Black New Yorkers are often the canaries in the coal mine for systemic ills, suffering first and worst when things are not right. With a supermajority in both chambers and Black leaders at the top, we are poised to pass more legislation that leads to positive change for our families if we continue to elect legislators who will work productively with their colleagues to get things done. From affordable housing to affordable childcare, home care, and healthcare, to fully funded foundation aid for our schools, to tighter gun controls, climate protections that ensure environmental justice and resiliency, there is a lot to do. I am a person who gets things done. I'm also someone who takes seriously the call to surround myself with diverse voices who can complement and supplement my knowledge and experience to optimize my decision-making. As town supervisor, I have listened, learned, and led on matters of equity and social justice, as well as environmental justice and economic opportunity. In Ossining, I co-founded the Community Task Force with our local branch of the NAACP, which is beginning to develop a diversity, equity, and inclusion strategic plan for our community. Working collaboratively with others, including groups like yours, I'll continue my steadfast dedication to the people I serve. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that. I just want to make sure that everyone knows also that Martin McDonald was also the former president of the Peekskill NAACP. So he does have a vested interest in social justice. So I just wanted to make that very clear. Okay, so next but not least, Colin Smith, please give your opening statement.
And thank you, Madam President, for that introduction. And good evening, everyone. It's an honor to be here. It's a privilege to be here. And I couldn't agree more from the time that Martin had approached me about putting something like this together. I'm sorry? Oh, from the time that Martin had approached me about doing something like this, that a forum on the Black agenda is absolutely necessary. And you know, as a person of color, I too understand the issues that we face. That you know, our voices are often not heard and disregarded, and historically we've been underrepresented. But I think as we have an opportunity now to change some of those things, at least to begin moving in the direction of having a greater voice, having more of a seat at the table. Yes, we have greater representation in government now than we have had at probably any other time in our history. But we need more than just that. We need greater representation in business. We need greater representation in the workforce, in the building trades, in the professions, in education. I am a very strong proponent, as many of you know, for education. And one of the things that I was insistent on as a school board member was that we increase the diversity of our faculty and of our administration, so that our children, most of whom are children of color, would have role models that looked and sounded like them, people that they can look up to, professionals. Thank you.
All right. Thank you very much for those opening statements. We will proceed to ask the questions. I am first up on the list, so you're going to get tired of hearing my voice, but nevertheless. Martin, do we have a question to start out, or do you want to?
Yeah, there's an unannounced question that the candidates did not get. The candidates were provided about 7 or 8 questions. There's one question that they did not get because we wanted to see how they were going to handle it. And I think you or Sabalmi can ask that question at this time.
Sabomi, you're on mute, Sabomi.
Thank you. So the unannounced question for all three candidates is, how would you prioritize the Black agenda? What do you see as the top 3 priorities for Black people and why? Vanessa, would you like to go first?
And you each have 2 minutes, and Martin will do the timekeeping on those as well.
So I'm going to repeat the question again. How would you prioritize the Black agenda? What do you see as the top 3 priorities for Black people and why?
Yes, thank you so much. And this is a really important question, and I think this was partially answered by me at the event that was held by the Westchester Black Women's Political Caucus this weekend. But I do believe that the number one issue facing Black and Brown people across the state is income inequality and the disparity that currently exists within our state, where we have very few people hold an incredible amount of wealth in our state, and we see the middle class disappearing more and more. I think that we need to continue to pass legislation that is going to tax the rich and make them pay their fair share. We were able to, I was part of an effort to advocate and pass legislation last year, such as the corporate tax and the progressive tax, which we were able to create $4 billion in new state revenues. If we are able, there's still about $50 billion that's on the table from state legislation that has yet to be passed. This is a way in which we can bring restitution to our communities, our Black and Brown communities who have been defunded and displaced for far so long. Using this money to be able to invest in our communities, invest in things like healthcare and in housing, which I think, as well as in bringing environmental justice to our communities, which I think are the other issues facing Black and Brown people here in New York State and across our country. Housing is one of the biggest issues here in the Hudson Valley, here in our district. Black women are 5 times more likely to be evicted than anyone else here in our state. And it's fundamental that we pass policies like good cause eviction, pass policies like establishing a housing voucher program, the tenant protection opportunity to own act to allow for us to establish rent stabilization here in our state, but also provide other options for people to be able to find affordable housing. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Vanessa. Dana? So I'm going to repeat the question and we would like your response. How would you prioritize the Black agenda? What do you see as the top 3 priorities for Black people and why?
Thank you. Well, I absolutely believe that equity is at the top of the list of what needs to happen in our state. I believe in reparations, and I think that this gets at the ultimate income inequality. While I know that that is a tough hill to climb, I think that is the direction that we need to work, because we do need to give our Black and Brown brothers the support that they need to make it in this world, which has been denied them for 400 years, basically. So I would work towards that. But I think that education, housing, and healthcare are critically important to make sure that our Black community is supported and can continue to survive and thrive in our communities across the 95th district and across the state. And I would work on all of the different levels of legislation that are critical to making that, making those top priorities, making sure that our kids get the start that they need in education, like with the basics, Ossining Basics. And now I think Peekskill adopted the basics program from Boston, is something that I worked on as a town supervisor. Partnering with our communities and our schools is critical to making sure that our communities can be successful, making sure that all of our businesses have extra opportunities that they need, and making sure that the money from the marijuana legislation actually gets into the hands of our Black community residents if they want to start a business, that they get to, and they get to be at the top of the list. So I will continue to make all of those my priorities and making sure that the Black agenda is critically important, supporting events like Juneteenth as an alternative. Independence Day is also very important, and I make sure that I put money behind that at the town as well.
So Colin Smith, I'm going to repeat the question and then I'll give you an opportunity to answer the question. So how would you prioritize the Black agenda? What do you see as the top 3 priorities for Black people and why?
Thank you for the question, Madam President. And I think that my colleagues have certainly hit on the key issues. Prioritizing the top 3, I'm not sure which is more important than the other, but I will say this: some observations that I've made and areas that I think that as a state assembly member, I would like to attack and to try and address, I should say, rather, with legislation, policy, but probably more important than anything, resources. I think it was either 2010, 2012, one of those 1,000,000,001 studies that the Census Bureau does showed that the difference between Black-owned and white-owned businesses in the United States in terms of annual revenue was something on the order of white-owned businesses generated 27 or 28 times the amount of revenue annually than Black businesses, Black-owned businesses. In terms of wealth, right? We know there's a wealth gap. Much of that is a generational wealth gap. So when we talk about and statistically speaking, the average Black family is about, or I should say, the average white family has about 5.5 to 6 times the net asset value of your average Black family. These were statistics back in 2012. My guess would be they're not much different, as they had not been much different between the 1960s when they started keeping these records until 2012 when that was their most recent data. So we have to find a way to bridge that gap, as was said. But specifically, I think, or at least one way in which we have to do that is we have to support Black-owned businesses. Right, we have to pour resources into our communities.
So thank you very much, all 3 candidates, for answering that question. And next, I will turn it back to Valerie, who will ask the questions on health and wellness.
Yes, thank you, guys. We're going to keep with the same format. And this is the question on health and wellness. According to the CDC, sickle cell disease affects approximately 100,000 Americans each year. SCD occurs in approximately 1 in every 365 AA births, while 1 in 13 Black or AA births has sickle cell trait. African American is AA. People with SCD have less access to comprehensive teen care than people with genetic disorders such as hemophilia and cystic fibrosis. What will you do to enhance services and care for individuals who have sickle cell disease in New York State? And there's a second question, but I'll ask that after you answer the first.
President Eden, just as a point of reference, these questions are now 90 seconds to respond. And
okay.
You will now start with Dana Levenberg and then you move to the next person is each question. So Vanessa's not always going to answer the question first.
The question first, right.
Yeah.
Okay, so because there was an interruption, would you like me to repeat that question?
That's okay.
Okay, thank you.
So first, I would like to address that part of the issue is differential access to healthcare. I believe that passing the New York Health Act would enable many more people to begin getting regular care, including those with sickle cell. When I was in Sandy Galiff's office, I got to know a young girl, Dream Shepherd, who had sickle cell, and her mom, Diana Lemon, who was doing everything she could to help her daughter, including donating her own stem cells. When Dream was finally released to go home, she had a central venous line. Diana really had no idea how to care for her daughter. accept what they told her in the hospital. And she felt that not only did she not get enough guidance, but that she needed professional nursing support, which insurance did not cover. I worked hard through Sandy's office to help her get supports in place, and then advocate and work with her office. And then I advocated with her, and she worked with our office, which eventually led to the passage of Dreams Law, which requires insurance to pay for adequate home health care for people who need services like maintenance of a central venous line. If elected, I would continue to listen to families like Dreams and identify their needs and work to get those needs met. I know that while we lost Dream about a year ago, her legacy will be the work that continues through her mom to bring equity to healthcare.
Time.
Thanks.
Okay, and Colin, you will be next. Would you like me to repeat the question?
Yes, please.
According to the CDC, sickle cell disease, SCD, affects approximately 100,000 Americans each year. SCD occurs in approximately 1 in every 365 African American births, while 1 in 13 Black or African American births has sickle cell trait. People with SCD have less access to comprehensive team care than people with genetic disorders such as hemophilia and cystic fibrosis. What will you do to enhance services and care for individuals who have sickle cell disease in New York State?
Well, I think, make sure. Can you all hear me? Okay, good.
Mhm.
I think that, again, this is a question of access, really a question of equitable access to healthcare. As we saw most glaringly during the pandemic, people in the African American community being the hardest hit by the pandemic is a direct result of not only the access to healthcare, but the culture of healthcare and what it means to be, to have access to that sort of whole person, holistic healthcare. So I think that, one of the ways that we can address it at the state level is to support legislation like the New York Health Act, which would provide full coverage for every state resident without regard to income or background, and that put healthcare, put everyone on at least on a basic level, level playing field with respect to with having access to that healthcare, and then education. Right, education is always a very big part of tackling any issue. When we talk about the pandemic, right, we had to, at the county level, we had to do a lot of educating the public on how to wear masks, where to get masks. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Okay, I see Aaron is checking our timekeeper. I see you, Aaron. Okay. All right. Next, Vanessa, the same question. Would you like me to repeat it?
No, that's okay. Thank you so much,
Thank you.
Valerie. I think I agree that that the New York Health Act would absolutely help us counteract the biggest hurdle here that people have to being able to gain the healthcare services that they need. The biggest hurdle with SCD treatment is that it is extremely expensive, and most patients use Medicaid in order to get covered or attempt to seek treatment through that coverage, which in many cases is not enough, or there are too many onerous obstacles in place to that often derail people from being able to get those healthcare, the treatment and services that they need. It would be much more cost effective for the state to be proactive, ensuring that there is robust treatment centers and options for patients with sickle cell disease. This could include expanding dedicated support for healthcare professionals that treat SCD. For example, despite being on a list of conditions that can receive medical marijuana, no department that treats SCD has received funds to train their team in administering it to SCD patients. So this is definitely something that we need to take a look at, and also ensuring that safety net hospitals, where a number of SCD patients go, are receiving training, resources, and support to offer SCD community members the care that they want. There's a sickle cell bill in the state legislature to spend around $5 to $10 million on getting sickle cell dedicated clinics. And I think that this is another way in which we can ensure that we're moving forward on this issue. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. All right, so we are going to the second part of the health and wellness question. The rise of fentanyl deaths has risen dramatically. Most impacted by this trend is Black America. According to a report found in the NYU Langone Health, a team of investigators found that between 2007 and 2019, the rate of Black Americans dying from opioids and cocaine climbed by 575%, compared to 184% among white people. While mortality from methamphetamine, you know what I mean, and other stimulants, MOS, short as MOS, remained at lower levels in 2019 than cocaine and opioid mortality, it has increased dramatically in recent years among Black Americans. MOS and opioid mortality rose 16,200% in Black people versus 3,200% in white people. We want something to be done immediately to reverse this trend. How would you get it done? And we're going to reverse it and go back to Vanessa. Well, actually, let's go to Colin being first now. So Colin, if you could answer that question.
Okay. Well, I would do my best to try and reverse it immediately, but in the event that that is not as readily available, I think one of the first things that we have to do is take a look at the fact that there's now money being awarded. In fact, Westchester County was just part of the state of New York entered into a huge over $1 billion+ settlement with the opioid industry to help combat the effects of opioid and methamphetamine and fentanyl addictions and overdoses. And I think Westchester is receiving like $17 or $18 million of that settlement. It's going to be statewide, obviously. So making the drug makers who have profited astronomically off of this crisis, making them pay their fair share in the process of rebuilding the communities that have been demolished. Now, you know, I'd be remiss if I didn't point out that you know, the fentanyl opioid crisis is not much different than the crack epidemic that hit the areas back in the 80s and 90s. But you know, because it wasn't impacting certain communities, it wasn't viewed on as a crisis that needed to be addressed, but rather as a problem that needed to be eliminated. So.
Thank you so much, the three of you, for answering those.
I don't think Dana answered.
Yeah, we have.
Yeah, Dana. Okay,
So
go ahead, Dana.
Dana, same question. Would you like me to repeat it?
That's okay.
Thank you.
So I absolutely believe that the pharmaceutical companies need to, that money needs to go directly to our Black communities. In the short term, I think we need to accelerate the trend of treating drug abuse like a health concern rather than a legal and or moral one. Reducing the legal concerns and the stigma that's attached and associated with drug use will help people who are struggling with addiction to access help more quickly and help non-addicted people have an easier time extending the help that is needed. We also have more information than ever about what people need in order to recover from drug addiction, and we need to make the best quality treatment affordable to anyone who needs it. More people need to be trained on how to respond to drug overdoses and administer life-saving medicines like Narcan. We need to continue funding training programs and the distribution of these medicines for free and publicizing the help that's available. These issues can be addressed by legislation, and I am committed to listening to people whose lives have been impacted by addiction to get that legislation right. As town supervisor, I have ensured that all of our municipal staff members are trained in both CPR and Narcan so that we as public servants can step in to save a life if, God forbid, the need should arise. The longer term solution, which I work toward every day, is building a society where drug use is less attractive because people are thriving and less deadly because people are healthier to start with and have access to healthcare when they need it. My mission is to
Right.
build healthy communities. Thanks.
Okay. And Vanessa.
Yes. Well, I think we have to prioritize universal access to public health tools for all New Yorkers that are struggling with opioid addiction. This includes medication-assisted treatment, access to naloxone and harm reduction services. These are life-saving public health tools that right now remain out of reach for way too many New Yorkers, especially those who do not have access or stable access to healthcare. I think we also have to move beyond addressing just the symptoms and these acute manifestations of the overdose epidemic and start to tackle the drivers, which include inadequate treatment, criminal justice involvement, housing instability, heightened risk among overdose survivors, as well as unobserved overdoses. When we neglect these core factors, we continue to fuel this crisis that we're facing here in New York. And we need to take leadership as a state to ensure that we're looking to find more new approaches and embrace new evidence-based interventions to start to save lives. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'm going to turn it over to Sabomi, President Sabomi, to ask the next question.
Thank you very much. So the next question has to do with educational equity. And I think this time we'll have Colin go first. In our own backyards, extremist groups are attempting to undermine our school boards and our children's right to an inclusive and culturally responsive education. Describe the power and influence you will have as assembly person if elected, and describe how you will plan to wield that power to move diversity, equity, and inclusion work in our school districts forward. How would you allocate funding for foundation aid? Colin?
Thank you for the question, Sabomi. And one of the nice things that we've seen in the last year is that Governor Hochul has taken the step that her predecessor refused to take, which was to settle the suit that had been brought against the state to fully fund foundation aid, which is the formula whereby schools are funded based on wealth and based on enrollment. So over the course of the next 2 to 3 years, actually, we will be getting, according to the settlement, all our schools will be getting their fair share or their full share of foundation aid that's been due since 2007 or something like that. Now, having said that, once that money is once the schools have that money, it really is a matter of making sure, and you can legislate this, I suppose, to a greater or lesser extent, but making sure that our teachers, that our faculty, our staff, our administrators have the resources that they need and also feel supported in their work to continue to develop this, as you mentioned, the diversity, equity, and inclusion curriculum, which is really what they have been doing for years now. It's just they've been teaching the facts, they've been teaching history, and there's been an increase, an increasing shine. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Colin. So next we'll go to Dana. I'm going to read the question again. Would you like me to read the question?
I think it's okay. I can.
Okay, go ahead.
Just because we had them in advance, so I know what it was. So I do think that the shooting in Buffalo makes the importance of this type of work so much clearer. It's often assumed that young people will automatically be less racist than their forebears, but incidents like this force us to recognize that it's not necessarily going to be the case. If we want to ensure that our young people grow up ready to thrive in our multiracial society, we need culturally responsive education in schools. The issue is delicate because curriculum decisions are generally the domain of the state regents rather than the legislature, but there are steps that we can take. The legislature has the power of the purse, of course, so we can, for example, make additional funding available to districts to help pay for professional development and other aspects of implementing curriculum aligned with the culturally responsive sustaining education framework. There are also bills like Assembly Member Stephanie Zinnerman's Amistad Act, which would move the Amistad Commission to the Department of Education and require that schools in the state provide curriculum relating to African American history, slavery, and race. And in terms of foundation aid, I fought alongside parents and other community members for as long as I was on the school board to get our allotment of foundation aid. And we were so happy to see we've come closer than ever, thanks to the efforts of our current state legislators, and that we're on track for it to be fully funded by 2023. We need to update the formula, however, by which foundation aid is allocated so that districts like Austin and Peekskill that are on the leading edge of certain demographic trends are no longer shortchanged.
Thank you very much. And Vanessa, since you got the question in advance, I take it you don't want me to repeat the question, correct?
No, that's okay. I absolutely agree with what my colleagues here have just mentioned. I think that when it comes to diversity, equity, and inclusion, it cannot be up for debate. And that is a standard that I think we need to set as a state. And we need to work to ensure that that is the standard that is being recognized across our public education institutions everywhere in New York. In terms of funding, I think that we have made huge progress by finally being able to see the fully funding of foundation aid, but I don't think that this aid is enough. I think that this is years of catch up that we now have to do, where this as Dana was mentioning, this formula is detrimentally outdated. And we have seen across many school districts where a lot of people are having to choose between raising their property taxes or, being able to provide more funding and in turn more resources for their public school systems. This is not a burden that should be left up to the individual taxpayer, nor should it be left up to just small municipalities, especially those like Peekskill and Austining that are already struggling to make ends meet and have been severely underfunded for so long. So I do think that we need to move towards a model where the state takes a needs-based approach across the state to see where the gaps currently exist for our school systems and start to put in the money to meet those gaps instead of relying on small municipalities to carry that burden. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Vanessa. So the second question on educational equity, and this time I will start with Dana. Currently, there are conversations about raising the high school dropout age and how that could help people of color. Would you work to make this happen? Why or why not?
So I think that raising the dropout age is a good idea, provided that we also commit to treating Black students' school avoidance as a problem to be solved by increasing support for students and families rather than punishment. In wealthy white districts, students who avoid school are given counseling and other services to help them return to school. This is what we need to do for our Black students. Raising the dropout age changes the calculus for families who might be considered and considering allowing a student to drop out in order to contribute to the family's economic bottom line, which may increase income in the short term, but greatly reduce the student's long-term economic prospects. So fully funded schools can hire social workers and use early alert systems to work strategically to provide supports and prevent at-risk students from dropping out. So we need to make sure that schools have that funding. And we also need to make sure that students succeed at school so they're less prone to struggling and dropping out. In Austining, as a PTA leader, as a school board member, and even now as town supervisor, I'm very involved in programs that work to give students a strong start. And I think I mentioned getting the Austining Basics program off the ground, doing outreach to the community, to publicize the program, get families involved. These are all pieces of the puzzle that need to be in place to make sure that our Black students have success. We've also seen that with many of our students that having 6 years to graduate makes it a lot easier for them to graduate and go on to successful careers.
Thank you so much, Dana. Colin, would you like me to read the question, or you're ready to give your response?
I'm ready. Thank you. So yeah, I agree with I agree with what has already been said. I think that any measures that are calculated to help our students, particularly African American students, young men and women of color, to achieve academically, educationally. We have to look at all of those, whether it's raising the age, the dropout age, whether it is, enhancing and increasing our pre-K programs, ensuring that we have universal pre-K in our school districts, whether it's, having greater access to college level courses in school. As one of in Peekskill, I know, for example, they do this in other districts as well. Students can come out of high school with their first year and sometimes even more of college credit already under their belt without having to pay. Not saddling our students with debt. Especially our Black students as they move on with their post-secondary education is also a way in which we can help them to achieve. So yes, all of these, and we know that people don't all learn. It's not like the parochial schools of the 50s where not everybody learns at the same rate. So yes, I agree. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Vanessa, would you like to give your response?
Yes, thank you. I actually think that the focus here needs to be on what drives students to drop out early as opposed to raising the dropout age. Because the reality is that even with our current dropout age where it's at, you have kids who are 13, 14, 15 who are dropping out of school because they have no other choice, and they are the ones who have to work in order to keep their families afloat. So we have to be really looking at the crux of these problems, providing services for families who are financially unstable to find stability, to ensure that kids don't have to grow up early and can be children and can be productive in an educational environment. And I think that at the end of the day, kids are not worried who are making choices, who drop out early, are not really worried about whether it's legal or not. Again, it's because they feel like they have no other choice. So focusing on ways to prevent students from dropping out early, focusing on social and emotional services, focusing on making our schools at the center of our communities to ensure that families as well have access to services to ensure that they that the stability exists there in the household so kids can continue to come to school, I think is where the focus needs to be on, as opposed to looking to take legal measures to hold our kids to a certain standard that ultimately they're not going to be able to hold given their conditions. Thank you.
Thank you, Vanessa. So the next two questions have to deal with criminal justice and police accountability. And this time I'm going to start with Colin. On June 12, 2020, Governor Andrew Cuomo signed Executive Order 203, requiring each local government in New York State to adopt a policing reform plan that will maintain public safety while building mutual trust and respect between the police and the communities they serve. Police reform is inclusive of a CCRB, which is a Civilian Complaint Review Board. Are you in favor of CCRBs with subpoena power? How will you ensure that we have funding allocated towards a police reform effort?
So that is a great question. And the answer to that, the first part of that question is absolutely. In this county of Westchester, where I sat as the Public Safety Committee chair during that process you just referenced, the biggest ticket item on our police reform task force agenda is the creation, what we have called the Office of Police Accountability, but essentially it is the same thing as the CCRB in New York City. And it would be, in my estimation, imprudent to create such an entity that lacked subpoena power. So yes, we are actually in the process of establishing that entity now, and it will have subpoena power, because without the ability to force the records or to subpoena witnesses or what have you, then it would be an entity without teeth. As far as funding goes, it's just another resource which the state, in this case the county, but at the state level, I would work with our local municipalities. I'd work with our counties to find funding, to find resources allocated for the purpose of either creating local or regional or county-wide police accountability, independent police accountability agencies for that purpose, as you stated, to hold officers accountable. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Colin. And Vanessa, would you like me to repeat the question, or are you ready to give your response?
I'm ready to give my response. So yes, I would absolutely support CCRBs having subpoena power. I also believe that the state needs to provide resources to also allow for municipalities to have access to independent civilian oversight boards. This could be in the form of inspector generals, as some cities already have established, or oversight commissions, but they have to be third-party government agencies that provide external oversight of law enforcement policies and practices, to ensure that there is truly accountability held, and that there isn't any oversized influence by the police force in any certain way. So this would be something that I think New York State can make an effort in. It's something that I advocated for as a local city council member. I understand that it's very hard for the city of Peekskill to establish such an agency, maybe even hard for the county of Westchester to do so too. So I would think that the New York State should be able to provide that level of funding to establish these third-party agencies to be able to create more accountability within our police departments across the state.
Thank you so much, Vanessa. Dana, would you like me to repeat the question, or are you ready to give your response at this time?
I can give my response. Thank you so much, Sabomi. So first, I just want to say that police reform is necessary and urgent, and the governor's executive order in 2020 should just have been the beginning of the conversation. Communities should not feel that they simply just fulfilled their obligations by creating a document. They need to follow through with implementing real change. Senator Elijah Reichlin Melnick submitted a bill last week, S9114, that aims to provide an ongoing framework for police departments to engage with local communities, to ensure that community stakeholders' input is incorporated into the police reform planning process, and to help make sure that all New Yorkers feel safe, protected, and heard. So far, there's no assembly, and it's not clear whether it will move in the session. If not, I would sponsor that bill should I be elected. It will require annual progress reports from all communities with law enforcement agencies, with metrics demonstrating their progress toward implementing improvements. And I would use the results from the reports to form the basis of a rationale for funding, and then make sure that we get what we need to make the real change. With respect to civilian complaint review boards, I am absolutely in favor of them. I do believe that they do need that subpoena power. It's important for the police to have independent oversight and accountability, since they literally hold the power of life and death in their hands. But civilian complaint review boards are only valuable if the public has confidence that their complaints will be taken seriously.
Thank you so much. So the next question on criminal justice and police accountability. So there's been a long history that Black people have been abused and killed by bad police officers who have been accused of abuse of power. Like in the case of Kenneth Chamberlain Jr. and Danroy DJ Henry right here in Westchester, we are demanding an end to police immunity, to qualified immunity. Do you favor the repeal of qualified immunity for law enforcement officers as proposed in Bill S1991-A4331? How will you work with others to make this a priority? Specifically, what other areas of police reform would be your next priority? Vanessa, I'm going to start with you.
Yes, thank you so much. I'm absolutely in support of ending qualified immunity. I don't believe, or I should say, I do believe that law enforcement needs to be held accountable and that officers who commit harm and take lives should not be insulated from that level of accountability. Our tax dollars should not be held hostage to defend people who are abusing their level of power, especially when they have such trust in our communities. So I would be in support of organizing, recruiting our legislators across the state and organizing with advocates and folks on the ground across the state to ensure that we are really echoing the urgency around getting this done to move us forward and really meeting our goals in kind of seeking justice and in this police reform process that we are currently in. Aside from ending qualified immunity, there's already a number of pieces of legislation that are already on the table that could also move us forward in progress when it relates to, as it relates to police reform. This includes transparency in police custody, which would help family members and lawyers, again, to locate people after they've been arrested and jailed by the police. Very often, if your loved one is arrested, you won't find out unless your loved one is able to get a phone call or a message out to you. So this would establish for people to be notified and ensure that you are able to have the resources you need and that your rights are being acknowledged. There's also legislation that would address lying in interrogations, especially when it comes to interrogations with young people. This would address police misconduct. Sorry, I just got muted. Oh, was that on purpose?
Time.
Oh.
Yes, your time was up. So Dana, if you would like to answer that question, would you like me to repeat it, or
Okay.
are you ready to give your answer at this time?
I'll just go. Thank you. So I absolutely support this bill to end qualified immunity. No group of people should be beyond accountability. It's about building trust in our communities. We need transparency, and everyone has skin in the game to break the cycle of violence by police. If a person violates the law and the standards of their professional practice, there are consequences. So too, there need to be consequences for police. I will make sure that this is a priority by pointing out not just the human, but also the economic costs of our current police regime. It's fiscally irresponsible and unfair to taxpayers to ask us to continue to foot the bill for overzealous and sometimes deadly police activity. Conservatives love to point out the cost of social programs, but they're very quiet about the billions of dollars that have been spent over the past decade settling claims of police misconduct. A relative handful of bad cops cost taxpayers exorbitant sums of money. Specifically, other police reform areas are in terms of criminal justice. I support elder parole and fair and timely parole. If we're talking about police reform specifically, I think police do too much in our society, frankly. It isn't fair to them, and it has potentially dangerous consequences for all of us, but particularly for Black people. Police are too often doing work that would be better left to social workers and other types of professionals who have more extensive and specialized training. So finding ways to address those problems would involve police, and that would be something that I would prioritize and something that I have experience doing, which is being proactive about addressing implicit bias with the police that we work with and supporting our.
Okay, so I guess you ran out of time. Colin?
Martin, you're on mute. Martin, you're on mute.
I was
Martin,
on
you are mute.
My apology. Yep.
Okay.
I like the new technique. Thanks, Martin.
No.
So you want to allow her to finish?
She was over her time.
It's okay. I went over. I got muted. It's okay. It's like a gong show.
So Colin, if you would like to respond.
Okay, thank you. Yes, I support the end of qualified immunity. The doctrine is antiquated, and it is also something that it's long overdue that we have gotten rid of it. The idea, I think that the idea that anybody, but especially a police officer or officer of the law, can be held blameless for any action of theirs, no matter how egregious, no matter how outrageous, solely because they were acting, within the scope of their authority as police officers, it just simply is no longer a tenable position for us as a society to hold. When I met when I think it was 2020, we at the legislature supported. We passed a resolution in support of the repeal of 50A. They call it. It's a civil service provision having to do with employee records. Analogous to this idea of qualified immunity was the rule that for years allowed emergency service providers, fire, corrections, and police officers, employee personnel records to be kept under seal in civil proceedings. So yeah, we need to strip it down.
Thank you so much, Colin, for answering that question. And now I'll turn it over to my good friend, Aaron, to ask the next two questions on economic equity and inclusion. Aaron? Unmute.
Thank you very much. I'm going to go right into the question and in the interest of time here. Number 8, we need you to close the gap and assess for Black business owners and aspiring Black entrepreneurs to have grant money set aside for Black people, not MWBEs, which helps many women and other minorities more than Black people. We want this funding to come with training to educate and guide recipients to be better positioned to succeed. What will you do, if elected, to make sure this is a priority? And I guess we'll start with Colin.
Okay. Thank you. I just want to say that while I understand the spirit of this question, I do think that funding that goes to MWBEs has reached to an extent, I don't know how far, but has helped Black-owned businesses get off the ground, particularly those owned by African-American women. That said, I agree that, and I think I alluded to this in an earlier question, that we need to provide resources, that is money, that is business infrastructure specifically to Black-owned businesses. We just don't do it enough. And, even in where I live in the city of Peekskill, there's, tons of businesses in the downtown area. I can count probably on one, maybe two hands how many of those businesses are owned outright by African Americans. This is not just some accident or of fate. This is because we just don't have the resources in our communities that other communities have. And the way one of the surest ways to get those resources is for the government to step in and to begin to give us that need. So as an assembly member, I'd be open to any suggestion and willing to work with anyone to increase, funding and resources that specifically target building Black-owned businesses.
Dana, please.
So I think that the initial idea behind the establishment of MWBEs was well intended, but it was flawed in that the various groups of people who have been lumped together under that umbrella have different levels of disadvantage and privilege, which stems from their different histories in this country. So women have a history of legalized oppression, but contemporary white women, for example, have more access to capital as a result of being born in families that on average have more generational wealth than Black families. They also face less discrimination than women of color. So giving white women and Black women the same business designation and opportunities reproduces the inequity that we're trying to address. I would ground the argument for offering specialized support to Black business owners in the concept of reparations, which, as I already alluded to, is something that I believe is important. The country owes a major debt of gratitude to African Americans because of the legacy of slavery, and also because of the cyclical poverty that was generated by racist federal housing policies and the exclusion of Black people from a variety of the New Deal era benefit programs. Slavery also happened in New York State, and its more recent history and state policies and initiatives like urban renewal also systemically disadvantaged our Black families, which further reduced their ability to create generational wealth. So I support reviving the bill to establish a community commission on possible reparations.
Thank you. Vanessa, please, are you ready?
I am. Thank you. I agree with Dana that there is definitely a disproportionate advantage to women, white women specifically, over women of color, and lumping them together in this program does continue to kind of replicate this issue. So I think setting aside funding specifically to address this long-standing issue and working towards wealth distribution to ensure that the disparity of income inequality and the gaps that exist no longer, or as so we can start to bridge the gap that exists within the African American community and just general Black and Brown communities across the state. I do believe that New York is in dire need of responsible economic management. And again, this goes back to the ensuring that we're acknowledging the long history here in New York of running austerity budgets, where we have continued to cut services in the Department of Labor and the Department of State, for example, that would offer trainings for new entrepreneurs that are looking to start businesses in their communities. So we need to start to reinvest in our budgets, in our communities, and start to no longer allow for certain parts of our economy to benefit from the decades of tax cuts that they have already benefited from, as well as the preferential treatment, in order for us to support our society in a way that is no longer systematically neglecting them. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So the next question, number 9. We need a change to the way affordability is calculated in our county and state. The formula as it is seems outdated at best and a form of intentional systemic racism at worst. Affordability impacts everything from housing crisis to access to education. Housing is a major issue that always get passed along to local municipalities to deal with. We want housing to be addressed at a statewide level. How would you work to dramatically change this paradigm so that there is a real connection between what we call working class and affordability? Dana.
So I think that the affordability calculations do reflect a mismatch between the federal guidelines and Westchester Putnam realities, for example. Our costs of living are far higher here, and it's inappropriate for us to use the federal standards when determining eligibility for affordable housing. We need calculations that are based on our local area. We also need to update the basket of goods that's used for these calculations. So, for example, many areas of life these days all but require smartphones. And then one needs to also be able to do multi-factor authentication. So you have to use your phone and a computer together to log in and be able to work. And that's something, again, that's introduced for like safety and security. So something that might have been a luxury 10 or 20 years ago is actually now a necessity. Studies to determine proper local bases for new calculations have to be funded and undertaken. In the town of Ossining, we require a 10% set aside of below market rate units for all of our multifamily development projects. And we set the income level actually at the income limit at 60% of area median income, or AMI, for rental units, which is more forgiving than many of our neighboring municipalities where the income limits are 80% AMI, and many people would say that that's not really affordable. So this is one attempt that we have taken to address the disparity in calculating affordability, but we can do better.
Well, thank you very much, the three of you. And now it goes back to you, Martin.
No, wait, Vanessa and Colin didn't answer.
Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't get those two. Let's go to Vanessa. I'm sorry.
No worries, Aaron. This is a very important issue, housing, and I think this has been an ongoing issue that I have had to deal with directly as a local elected on the Peekskill City Council, where we're seeing a number of developers coming in and pitching projects and typically using formulas to build affordable units or build in affordable units at an average household rate that is more recognized by the Westchester County annual household as opposed to that of localities. For example, in Westchester County, on average, a household makes about $127,000, where here in Peekskill, an average household of 4 makes about $57,000. So when you're using these formulas, you're often not really recognizing the state of the economy and the state of housing in that locality. And that would be something that I advocated for on the local level when we were drafting our inclusionary zoning policy. Unfortunately, that fell short, but it would be something that I would advocate to establish on the state level to ensure that when these development projects are being pitched, that affordability is truly recognizing what is affordable for the residents living in those communities. I also believe that we have to establish rent stabilization in order to hold the line from what is a very volatile housing market, because as I mentioned, we have developers who are coming in, building luxury developments where market rate is about $2,200 for a 1-bedroom, and establishing rent stabilization would make it so other landlords could not raise their rent to exorbitant amounts. Thank you.
Okay, Colin, you're next. You're up.
Thank you. Yes, and I think this is this one of the challenges when you're talking about affordability and how you calculate who qualifies and at what income level from a state perspective is that you're dealing largely with local. New York State is a home rule state, so you're dealing with municipalities that sit at various positions along this line of affordability. In Peekskill and places like Greenburgh, where there are much more much larger much more affordable housing is different from areas like in Cortland and in Yorktown, where they hardly have any. And so there's you have to work with developers and be willing to work with local municipalities and try and fortify them and assure them that working with developers. One of the issues we came up against time and again at the city council in Peekskill was a fear by some members that if we didn't acquiesce to these affordable developers' demand, they were going to take their business somewhere else and we'd have no development. That's patently untrue. If there's space to develop, developers are going to want to develop, and you will find somebody to do that. So it's trying to get the municipalities to work with the developers in that regard.
Thank you so much to all three of you. And now we'll go to Valerie for closing statements, where each person will get 3 minutes to give their closing statements. Valerie?
Okay, thank you guys for your answers for all of those questions. Now we will go to closing statements, and you will have 3 minutes each. Please hold to the 3 minutes. Martin, you're off mute, so you're raring to go with that bell, ding, ding, ding. So we will start with, as we started in the beginning of this meeting, with Vanessa, and we'll go to Dana and then to Colin. So Vanessa, please start your closing statement.
Thank you so much. Thank you to all the supporting organizations for holding this really important platform for the candidates to all make their issues known. I am very happy to be here presenting as a candidate for State Assembly in District 95. And as someone who grew up in Peekskill, I watched my family struggle financially with my parents who left Columbia for New York, seeking better opportunities and sacrificing so much to provide our family a better life. I watched my father work long 17-hour days instead of spending time at home. And I watched my mother, a domestic worker, get paid poverty wages with no benefits for her hard labor. And after graduating from college with 2 degrees and thousands of dollars in debt, I had to move back home because I wasn't making enough to live on my own, even in the community that I grew up in, and decided to save up and realized that as years went by, there were so many of my peers, my friends who I had grown up with, who were in the same situation, who had gone back to their parents' house and were struggling, and were watching their parents continue to struggle to make ends meet despite working so hard for so long. And I saw how these financial vulnerabilities crippled so many of my neighbors in my community, and I looked for ways in which I could get involved locally, originally as an activist joining the fight to stop the Spectra frac gas pipeline expansion, later becoming an appointed member of the Conservation Advisory Council, and eventually running for Peekskill City Council, becoming the youngest council member ever elected at age 25. And although I got an intimate understanding of the struggles facing folks in Peekskill, I learned that I couldn't address their problems at the scale of city government. And now, while the rich continues to get richer in our states and the middle class continues to disappear, it's apparent that these issues are no longer ours alone, but are systemic and demand responses that treat it as such. So as we enter year 3 of the pandemic and the horizon of financial stability seems further and further away, it's time that we ask ourselves, can our state do better to meet the needs of New Yorkers? As a longtime community activist, I've seen how easily our communities are sacrificed in the name of profit. I fought against corporations who have been polluting our communities. As an immigrant rights organizer, I've won transformative statewide campaigns to expand driver's licenses to all New Yorkers, as well as helped win a statewide fight for the largest investment in excluded workers in the country. As a local public servant, I fought the militarization of our police department, and I demanded community benefits from developers rather than displacement, as well as affordable housing that put people and climate over profit. And now this year, I'm running for state assembly because all New Yorkers deserve an environment that won't kill them, safe, affordable housing, excellent healthcare without barriers, and stable union jobs paying livable wages. I believe that we can create a fair economy, but for ordinary people to benefit from our government and the economy the way that the rich do, we must close major tax loopholes and make the rich pay their fair share. Our movement for a better future has demonstrated the power of collective action and what is possible when organized people come together to demand an economy where everyone can thrive. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Vanessa. And Colin. I'm sorry, Dana. I did it again, sorry.
That's okay. Thanks, Valerie. So thank you all for your thoughtful questions and for sponsoring this forum tonight. And I spoke here today because I was invited, but please do know that especially on these issues, I promise to be first and foremost a listener and to hear you. I'm running for assembly because I know that I have what it takes to not just win the seat, but to deliver results for this district. It takes all kinds to make the world go round, and we all have different talents we can leverage to make the world a better place. My talents include listening, learning, leaning into complexity, and moving beyond identifying problems to finding workable solutions in context. Moreover, as former Chief of Staff to Assemblywoman Sandy Galiff, I know what it takes to build a budget that will serve the 95th AD well, and what that means for our schools, our local businesses, and our infrastructure. I understand the legislation needed to secure environmental justice, having put so much focus on protecting our environment, from introducing electric vehicles to our municipal fleet, to solar legislation, the New York stretch code, to food scrap recycling, tree management and protections, to gas-powered leaf blower legislation, and everything in between. I understand government well, and I know how we can use the tools that we have to promote social equity, and I will do the work. You can count on me to be an engaged and productive legislator who works well with my colleagues and will move things forward, because that's what I've done my entire career. I've never lost an election. I have a 7-for-7 record because I work hard and I'm a great collaborator. I've gone beyond just identifying problems to finding solutions and implementing those solutions. If you've worked with me or take a look at my record on the school board and as supervisor, you'll see that I am someone who readily says yes to good ideas that will improve life for people in the community. whether it's school-based initiatives like the ones I mentioned earlier, or initiatives like community garden programs for our Head Start or free wellness sessions at the waterfront. I'm an enthusiastic yes on any workable program that will help build healthy communities. I'm approachable. I listen to your ideas. I implement ideas quickly, and I will continue to do so as Assemblywoman. I look forward to your partnership and to your support. Thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you for that. And Colin, if you can give your final statement.
Hey, thank you, Madam President. It's been a pleasure being here with you all this evening, and thank you for these questions. They're all very important questions, and ones, these and more, which we have to continue to work together to find answers and solutions to the issues that they raise. You know, my father grew up in the village of Croton, and he was one of a handful, and that's being generous, of Black students in that district back in the 50s and the 60s when he was going through school. He was neither expected nor was he encouraged to be of any great or noteworthy success from a social standpoint, because it was at a time when that was simply something that African Americans simply couldn't aspire to, at least not without an incredible amount or exertion of will and good fortune. But he wanted better for me and for my brother, and he has you know, seen the fulfillment of his dreams, because we have gone beyond what my parents had been able to accomplish. You know, even as a boy growing up in Peekskill in the early 1970s, you know, things were a lot different than they are today. But I walk around. I spend a lot of time just, you know, watching, looking. I walk around town. I walk around Peekskill. I walk around some of our other towns and cities in Westchester, and I see that our people are underrepresented at every turn. Like I mentioned before, we have a handful of businesses in Peekskill and in Ossining and in even White Plains. We have to be able to lift ourselves up from this. When I ran and won the county legislative seat in 2019, I was the first Democrat in 50 years to win that seat, and I was the first African American ever to win that seat. And if I win this assembly seat, I will be the first African American to represent the 95th Assembly District. And I bring all of you with me, and I invite you after this, as we move on from here, to let's continue to have this conversation about how we're going to improve things for our people, and to improve our way of life, and to make things better for our children. Everybody else has had a shot at this. It's our turn now. And that's what that is my goal, and that is my purpose here as your elected official. And whether I get to the assembly or whether I'm allowed to remain at the legislature, that's what I'll be doing. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank all three of you for your final comments. What I would like to do is ask our moderators if they can have a brief statement, and then we will close out this meeting. And thank you to all of the elected officials. I saw a Councilman Scott on the line. I saw a few of our Peekskill Area Pastors Association pastors on the call, as well as the Assistant Director of the Youth Bureau, and and our new president of the Putnam Valley branch, brand new NAACP branch in Putnam Valley, Miss Kemi Pog, that's her name on the screen. We call her Sherry. But nevertheless, I want to move on and ask our moderators for a final statement. And I'll start with our president of the Westchester Black Women's Political Caucus, Bomi McCauley.
I would like to thank each of the three candidates tonight for coming out and addressing these questions, which are critical to the Black agenda. As president of the Westchester Black Women's Political Caucus, I am laser focused on getting Black people elected into public office. I need to see our faces represented as elected officials. So it's been a pleasure to come here tonight. I'm very happy to see members of my Peekskill chapter on the call, as well as friends like Andrew Ely, Kemi Pogue, and Athema Goodson, Sandra Blackwell, Jackie Simpkins, Michelle Keller, and a whole lot of people that Felicia Cummins, and just grateful to be able to see you join this very important call tonight. The 95th Assembly District is a very important district to the Black agenda. We have many of our people live in these communities, and I have to make sure that they are represented in what goes on in that community from the perspective of the assembly person. So thank you for inviting the Westchester Black Women's Political Caucus to co-sponsor this event with you. We are so grateful for this opportunity. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And thank you for all the work that you do. And next I will go to Martin McDonald. Martin, thank you so very much. I just want to thank you from Peekskill NAACP for organizing this forum. It's very hard to put things like this together, and you stepped up and allowed us to do this. So I thank you. And if you have something that you would like to say to everyone.
No, Aaron, did you want to say something? You're on mute.
On mute.
Just to end the meeting, I'll thank everyone for participating here, the candidates as well as I think I saw 35 people on board here tonight. So that's always a good thing. As long as people show up for these events, things are working in the right direction. Thank you.
No, thank you. And I'll be brief and just say that, Black votes matter. Black voters matter. Black voters have a power and a key that we need to start to realize that we can tip an election, and we need to have our voice be heard. We need to have our demands met. And I thank the candidates. I think you did an excellent job all the way around. Thank you for the courage to be here, because I think it may have made a couple of people uncomfortable. This is a beginning of what I think needs to be a normal for us as we get the other side involved in a conversation. We get independents and Republicans. They need to address a Black agenda and Black voters honestly and correctly. So thank you for that. And thank you for everyone that took the time to join us here tonight. And moderators, you've done a fantastic job. I'm always going to support the NAACP, both in Austin and in Peekskill, and the Black Women's Political Caucus is great to make this bridge happen, and look forward to doing it again in the future. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I just want to say, guys, everyone is welcome to join the Black Women's Political Caucus, I'm sure, as well as the NAACP. I always take opportunities like this to say we have to step up, we have to fight, we have to do the work. And so with the candidates, Dana Levenberg, Vanessa Agudelo, Colin Smith, thank you for even stepping up and making sure that you had a voice in order to represent our communities, and we will get out to vote. And so we have, I'm preaching to the choir because everybody on this call I know is a voter, but make sure you get out to vote, and make sure that you vote right, and make sure that you hear more of the agenda of all of the candidates. We are nonpartisan, so we can't really give you all who we're going to vote for, but I will say we will continue to have these conversations. We meet, the Peekskill NAACP meets every fourth Tuesday. So this is the first time we will be in person, and there will also be a virtual opportunity. So you're welcome to attend that as well. Again, Martin, thank you for organizing this. Thank you, Sabomi Macaulay, and thank you, Aaron Moore, and thank you, candidates. Have a good night, everyone. Be safe.
Good night.
Be well.
Thank you. Have a good night. Thanks.